Hello and welcome to the second video in the topic of UK challenges. Before we get into the second UK challenge, we're just going to do a bit of a recap on the first challenge we introduced in the last video through some exam question practice. So, there are two questions here. You can choose just one of them to answer, but I'm going to pause the screen while you do that. It should take you about 5 minutes maximum, so pause the screen, choose one of the questions and answer it. When you're ready, unpause it and I'll go through sort of some of the things you could have said or ways you could have got the information for these questions. Okay, so hopefully you read all the information, all the pointers and the remember to kind of advice I put on there. But for those sort of looking for a more explicit question, like a grade 4 or lower standard question, this says, suggest how transport in one UK city can be made more sustainable for 2 marks. So because it says suggest, it's really an explain question. You need to put a connective in there. It's only worth 2 marks, so you only need to really name one transport system, one sustainable transport strategy, but try and link it to a specific city in the UK and link it to how it makes it more sustainable. So all the ingredients you need to answer this question are in the question text itself. So something as straightforward as London use congestion charging, UK city transport strategy. This helps make it more sustainable because the money generated funds public transport. There you go, 2nd mark. Or Norwich have introduced park and ride schemes. That's 1 mark. UK city, park and ride as a transport system. This helps make Norwich more sustainable because it reduces people using their private cars. Alright, so there we go, 2 marks. Anyway, you could have used public use bicycles like Boris bikes or Beryl bikes in Norwich, doesn't matter. This question is slightly more difficult, but only really because it wants you to explain 2 ways. So explain 2 ways in which the UK could reduce the impacts of increased population. The impacts of increased population we identified as things like consumption challenges, too much energy consumption. And energy consumption can include using cars, because cars use fossil fuels, use oil in the formation of petrol, etc. So the answer really is exactly the same as the question above, it's just being more vague about it. So there's more skill from the student or the candidate in actually working out what the examiner wants here. In this one, it's really clear, it wants transport, it wants a UK city. In this one, it wants twice as many, but it's trying to get you to kind of work out that the impacts of increased population lead to problems of sustainability, which therefore can be solved by transport solutions. So again, you could answer this the same way as up here, once for like congestion charging extended and once for park and ride schemes extended. Right, let's now look at our second challenge facing the UK. So today we're going to be looking at population and economic challenges. So these are the 4 ways in which this one's divided up. You've got the 2-speed economy, so the north-south divide. This is something which we have certainly seen in the topic of development. So during the topic of development, we looked at how the UK had a core and periphery regions. The core region largely being London and the periphery regions being pretty much everywhere else. And we looked at how that affected sort of things like house prices and wages. So that one links into the development topic. The use of brownfield and greenfield sites, we mentioned kind of in the last section, but we're going to go into more detail with regards to that. Migration patterns. Migration was something we saw in changing cities as a topic, and different stakeholder viewpoints on migration, also something we saw in the changing cities topic. So, again, as ever, these could be linked to a 16-mark question, just be aware of that. And we're going to start by looking at the 2-speed economy. So, the 2-speed economy, I'd write this as a subtitle and make sure you've got like the notes written down. But the 2-speed economy shouldn't be a new concept to you. Think about this idea of core and periphery regions. We looked at the core and periphery in more detail for India, where Bihar, which is a periphery region, was far less developed than the core regions of Mumbai in the Maharashtra region. So the UK is no different, and I can illustrate this through a couple of things. Firstly, this one shows you house prices, average house prices. I don't know when this was, because it's some time ago, because I think it's definitely gone up since then, but average house price by region. So Greater London, above £335,000 is the average house price. It's definitely out of date, this. And then right down the bottom here, you've got average house prices of between £135,000 and £154,000. So here you've got a bit of a trend going of the south and east, and for some reason Northern Ireland, there is quite high house prices relative to the rest of the UK. Now this is another map which illustrates sort of a similar point. This one is about incomes by region. So again, average income, I think minus expenses. So this is probably disposable income. You can see London has the highest average disposable incomes, followed by kind of the south east, then East Anglia, then followed by places like Scotland and the southwest, and then the kind of Midlands and the northeast specifically actually are where the lowest average kind of disposable incomes are found. You can see the breakdown of the different regions on the right hand side. Okay, and the UK's average is 15,000. So actually, places like London and the southeast are so far above the UK average, they're bringing it all up completely. So actually, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 regions of the United Kingdom, that are below average disposable incomes. So this illustrates the two-speed economy quite nicely, because two aspects of the economy that are measurable are how much money you're taking home and how much your house costs. And you can see the very similar pattern between house prices and incomes. Right, solutions to this then, because we're going to go straight into solutions to this and things that the government are already doing to some extent, although controversially in some cases. HS2, or High Speed Rail 2, that's one way they're trying to distribute the appeal of kind of jobs and industry north of London, because the issue is London. Let's be honest. London has the biggest industries, the most valuable industries, and therefore people flock to London to get the most well-paid jobs. The income is highest there, despite house prices. So what the idea is essentially trying to spread this wealth and encourage companies to set up further north. Now, as well as it being a bit cheaper to set up further north, because there's a bit more space, a bit more land, it's also trying to encourage workers and educated workers to want to go and work in those areas as well, to try and balance out the level of economy, balance out the money going to different areas. We don't want a two-speed economy. We don't want inequality in the UK. We don't want core regions and periphery regions. We want everywhere to be as wealthy as everywhere else. Now, currently, that's miles away, but this is something they're trying to do to address it. So what you can see with HS2 is that, to get from London to places like Birmingham, Nottingham, Crewe, Sheffield, major cities in the north, it should take essentially half the time it used to. It excludes places in East Anglia, but we're not too far from London anyway, a couple of hours. But then even going as far north as places like Newcastle, Edinburgh, Glasgow, shouldn't take as long as it once did. In fact, when it comes to Edinburgh, London to Edinburgh is currently about 4.5 hours, whereas it's planned to be just over 3.5 hours with HS2, shortening the journey by a bit. So the idea is that that's like a commutable distance. It means that not only can people from Edinburgh go to London, but it's actually trying to do it the other way. Trying to get people from London and encourage them to move further north for work or for commuting, or even to move there permanently. So HS2 is one thing. Now, the trouble with HS2 is it's probably one of the most controversial rail projects ever. And that just doesn't mean in the UK, it means like the world. So essentially, like the cost of it is one big factor. They reckon it'll be done between 2036 and 2040. Nothing like a tight schedule. And it'll cost in the region of £106 billion. Now, that was the last time I looked. This figure changes wildly depending on what website you look at and what year you look at. So what is in agreement is it's going to cost a lot, and a lot more than a lot of people think is worthwhile. The other thing the government have been trying to develop is this thing called the Northern Powerhouse. And again, this is a bit of a quote, a bit of a sound bite from a government at the time. But they wanted to try and create like big centres of industry and growth in cities in the north, that what they called core cities: Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield, Hull, and Newcastle. So they essentially said that the workforce combined of those areas is about 15 million workers, and they're very educated areas. Clever people live in those areas. So why not set up companies in those areas? So the BBC actually have been one of the main drivers of this, because they moved to Media City in Salford, which is near Manchester, in 2012, and now most of their broadcasting is actually set up from near Manchester. So there is movement towards the northern areas, but there's again a lot of criticism about the speed and about the investment of encouraging businesses that way, which have all been interrupted through other means like Brexit and COVID and all that sort of stuff. So, get some notes on these, please. This is a full set of notes to write down in your book. If you're not finished now, just pause the screen to get those done. And if you want to watch the video, it's saved onto 365 in the Jog Vlogs folder, or you can just type in that YouTube video link. But there'll probably be more up-to-date ones about High Speed 2 and the Northern Powerhouse if you want to search up. Okay, so now we've got to try and link that settlement challenge with population, and that again is a bit of a crossover with the last challenge we looked at, because space and house prices and space to build houses is one of those consumption challenges as a result of population increase. Now, I want you to get an understanding of this idea of brownfield and greenfield sites in as much depth as possible. And on the screen, if you want to do a screenshot or an actual handout, if you want to go into the Jog Vlogs folder of Microsoft 365, is a completed list of advantages and disadvantages for both brownfield and greenfield sites, as well as a definition. So a greenfield site is a place that has no previous buildings or land use on it. Brownfield sites are places that have previously been built on but are no longer used. And then what is good about building on greenfield sites but what's bad, and what's good about building on brownfield sites and what's bad. So there are pros and cons to building on both. And what I'd like you to do to test your understanding of that is to get this handout and then decide from 1 to 6 whether you would build it on brownfield or greenfield sites. Okay, so pause the screen while you do that. Try and write something down in your book. That'll take you a good sort of couple of minutes per thing, just to justify why. You might be repeating your reason, but that's fine. Do that. Take say 10 minutes to do that. When you're ready, unpause the screen and I'll go through some possible answers for you. Okay, so a new park and ride car park. Well, the idea of park and ride is that it is outside the city. So it stops congestion within the city. There's no point you driving into the middle of the city to get a bus in the city. That doesn't make sense. So park and ride really is ideally situated on greenfield sites, because you're going to be building a park and ride site on an area with a massive car park, so you need space, you need cheap land, but you also don't want to have to necessarily clear land, or you probably won't be able to because there won't be anything there. So it's outside the town or city itself. So greenfield site's probably most appropriate for park and ride. A block of residential flats. Well, the good thing about flats is they build up, so they don't require a big footprint. So as a result of there being block of residential flats, I would suggest that this is a brownfield site kind of project. Find an area of the city that's not being used, knock it down, and then build up from the bottom a block of flats. That makes sense. A housing estate with 500 homes. Think things like the Queen's Hills estate. That's absolutely a greenfield site project. Again, needs the space. 500 homes is a considerable amount, but you want to try and make sure that the homes are sustainable, so there's green space built in, so it makes sense if you start with having some green space in the first place. An industrial estate, that requires space, because again, big factories, big buildings, container buildings, whatever it might be, so an industrial estate needs to be sort of on the outskirts of a town or a city, so therefore it's going to be probably a greenfield site. A new indoor sports hall facility, that one you can probably build on a brownfield site. Again, if you can repurpose an area of the city, because it's indoors, you don't have to worry about air quality, and it doesn't have to be huge. It could be, big enough to house like a bit of gym equipment maybe, or a badminton court, something like that. But a new outdoor sports facility, you don't want to be in the middle of a city breathing in all the smoggy air. So I would say that's probably better for a greenfield area. Think somewhere like the Nest, which is just north of the airport. It's sort of a Norwich City community hub kind of thing. So 1 greenfield, 2 brownfield, 3 and 4 greenfield, 5 maybe brownfield, 6 greenfield. If you've got different answers, as long as your justification makes sense, it doesn't matter. Okay, so some dingbats for you. Here we go. Alright, migration. This is mine, minus the NE, so that's 50 Shades of Grey, my grey, and that's someone called Charlie Sheen, who's a bit of a former actor. Was quite funny in a couple of films, but as you know, got some demons. So migration. So this is a definition. Write down a definition. The exam would love a definition question. And then when you're ready, unpause. Okay, another one for you. I'm really sorry about this one. Immigrant. Okay, that's Jimmy Savile. The only reason I've used him, I hate his image, but is because everyone knows who he is, so you're more likely to get the dingbat. So, immigrant, Grant Holt. Okay, if you don't know Grant Holt, immigrant, and that's a person moving into a country in order to live there. Write that definition down as well. Okay, another one for you. Oh look, another picture of Grant Holt, but with a really handsome, short, stoopy chap about to run a race. Yeah, me and Grant, we're buds. I wish. Okay, another one here for you. Historians might get this one. Okay, this is emigrant. That's M and M. Divided by 2 is just M. That's EE. So divided by 2 is just E. So ME. And that's Ulysses Grant, who was part of the American Civil War, major player in it. So a person moving out of a country in order to live somewhere else. Definition for you. Off you go. Alright, last one. This one is net migration. So if you take away the people leaving a country from the ones going in, that's what you get. You get your net migration. So if the number of people migrating to a country, the immigrants, are higher than the emigrants leaving a country, then you have positive net migration. And if the number of people leaving, the emigrants, are more than the number of people arriving, the immigrants, then you have net negative migration. Okay, so UK migration, here's some notes for you. What you can see on the right is a map, and the circles represent the number of migrants in that area. So from 2007 to 2012. You can see us over here near Norwich, we don't have a huge number of migrants in that year, sort of over just about 1,000-ish. Actually, maybe a bit more than 1,000. Maybe sort of around 4,000 or 5,000. London clearly a hotbed of migration, and also you've got kind of other major cities like Edinburgh, the capital city of Scotland, and places like Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds, the northern powerhouse areas we'd expect. So this proportional symbols map. Okay, I'm not going to expect you to produce your own one or anything like that. It does say on here, use the template of a world map to plot proportional symbols for the UK immigration patterns, but I'm not going to make you do that because it's too tricky without me properly showing you. Okay, but this is just an illustrative purpose to show you where UK migration is really happening and how that links into this idea of the two-speed economy. Clearly, people are migrating to London. The reason they're migrating to London, because that's where the streets are paved with gold. That's where the jobs are, the money is. Fewer people are moving to places like Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds, although you could see if you could increase the kind of appeal of these areas, you might shift some of the migration from London northwards, and that would spread it out, make it slightly more manageable. Okay, so I'm not going to make you do this. This is just a world map that you could use for proportional symbol practice. That's something we'll do for another session. There you go, shows India, for example, is a place which UK receives a lot of migrants from, about 45,000, and other examples, you've got China, who appear on both lists. They've got 39,000 people migrate to the UK from China, whereas about 19,000 people migrate to China from the UK. Most of those people, in both cases, are Chinese nationals, probably migrating to the UK for education, and then once they've completed their studies, migrating back to China to work. So if you do want to have a go at doing this, please feel free, and if you want to screenshot the screen currently to help you, that's fine, but just make sure that you are following the key where 1 millimetre in width equals 5,000 people. So the fatter the arrow, the more people. Alright. So UK migration statistics, you've got again another graph here, and you will find a lot of resources in this topic. So exposing you to different types of graph is really important. Now there's a video that links into UK migration here, which if you click on, you can't click on that, but if you follow that YouTube video or go into the Jog Vlogs folder of 365, you should find the video saved. But what I'd really like you to do is try and just describe this graph. So see what's happening. What's happened in terms of net migration over the course of time. So 0 represents kind of the population, excluding migrants. And if any bar goes below, it's more people leaving the country than entering. And then if the bar goes above 0, it's more people entering the country than leaving. Okay, so that would be what we call positive migration or net migration, and anything going down is negative net migration. So since the mid-90s, you can see the numbers are getting pretty high in the positive. So there is greater amounts of migration, in sort of 2015-ish, we had approximately 300,000 migrants entering the UK. Now, there's reasons for that, and there's a couple of little notes on here which should hopefully help you work out those reasons. But that pattern is currently being reversed slightly. So have a go at describing this graph and look at the relationship between immigration and emigration, and just why the graph is changing as it is. And if you look up a recent kind of graph on migration statistics. Okay, so why is it that the migration rates in the UK have been going up, or had been going up to that point? Well, migrants move for loads of reasons. One of the primary reasons is economically speaking. They go for jobs and money. And you can see the vast total of immigration that goes into the UK. 44% of people said it was for work or looking for work. The next highest in terms of people coming into the UK was for study, so people coming into the UK for like university education. Some of them joining family members, so maybe previously people that had looked for work stayed, and then these 14% arrived when they had a chance to settle in. And then other reasons might be safety, so migrants leaving for leaving Syria for conflict reasons. If you look at the reasons why migrants or people leave the UK, so UK nationals and others, 56% are looking for work, 27% are looking for other reasons. I'll explain those in a second. And fewer people are joining family or studying. We've got a really good education system in the UK, and a lot of people just regard it really highly, so you wouldn't want to necessarily leave. But other countries know the UK's education system's quite significant, and therefore that's why we get this change in percentage. Also, they get a chance to learn English when they come. The other category is so big because this really accounts for people like retirees, people moving to Spain or to Portugal or south of France in their retirement, or maybe if they're retiring early, for example, just to get a bit of sun. So most people leave the UK for work, and then the rest probably leave to retire. Whereas when it comes to people coming in, they're coming in for work, but they're also coming in for education purposes. Right. So, is the UK migration good or bad? Now, this is likely to be where the biggest questions about this particular challenge come into an exam paper. They're going to be interested in different people's views on migration because it is a hot topic, and it's never really gone away, this topic. It's always going to be fairly relevant because it divides opinion. So migration is seen as a challenge in the UK because of these mixed opinions it creates. As well as the fact that it's quite high numbers. Significant numbers do create pressure on resources. Some groups are really for migration, myself being one of them. I'm someone that loves multiculturalism, diversity, and from a human geography perspective, I understand that we have job roles that we need to fill, and I like to get my teeth looked at more than once a year, so I need to welcome migration because migrants are filling job roles that we have a shortage of, massively important, and in the meantime generating tax through the money they earn. What I'd like you to do though is just look beyond my viewpoint. I'd like you to look at different people's viewpoints, and that's quite a challenging thing to do. When you've got a perspective, you find it hard to come out of your own viewpoint. What I'd like you to do is represent one stakeholder first, and then have a look at what their views on migration would be. Now, if we were in a classroom, you would then just present your view to the class, and then you'd get a summary overall. What I'd like you to do is have to summarise and hold the views of different stakeholders. Okay, now you're looking for sensible reasons, and you're looking for a whole list of positive, reasons you might like migration, and maybe reasons you might not like migration for as many as of the stakeholders you can think of. So I'll give you the stakeholders, and you have to work out what they do or don't like about migration in each case. So here we go. We've got farmer with a large turnip field in Norfolk, UK government, local government, a UK unemployed national, a Syrian refugee, and a Polish migrant worker. So from each of these people's perspective, I'd like you to tell me why they think migration is good, why they might think migration is bad, and what their overall view on migration is likely to be. Alright, so pause the screen, copy this table or screenshot it and fill it in with text boxes or whatever you want to do, but you need good and bad plus overall for each one of these 6 different stakeholders. In an exam, you're likely to have to be specific in your stakeholder view. So name stuff like a farmer in Norfolk who farms turnips. Be that specific. It makes sense because it helps exemplify your point. All right, so pause the screen. Do that now. When you're ready, unpause. Okay, so I've got some ideas if you were really struggling here. With regards to the, I've put butternut squash down. I've changed it from turnips. Reliable labour, work ethic. A lot of farm areas of East Anglia, not just Norfolk, but Lincolnshire and Cambridgeshire and Kent, they all are absolutely struggling to find reliable workers because Eastern European migrants have been kind of put off coming to the UK because of Brexit. And they preferred a lot of Eastern European workers because they worked long hours without moaning and having fag breaks. So that it would be a reason why they like migration. They might not like the fact that the Eastern Europeans, often it was in East Anglia, don't speak very good English, and there's a bit of a language barrier there. So I'm trying to look at from both sides. Overwhelmingly, farmers in those areas would be in favour of migrant labour because it allows them to bring their harvest in. So in these red bits, these are all kind of little areas that you could have looked at when it comes to identifying the different viewpoints. So go back and look at your list and use this to fill in any gaps you might have, and then hopefully you'll get an idea about coming to an overall opinion. Now, the overall view is kind of up to you. It's based on whether you think the good reasons are more significant than the bad reasons, or vice versa. So, a farmer, I would go with their overall view is probably they think migration's a good thing. The unemployed UK national probably thinks migration overall is a bad thing for them. Okay, so pause the screen while you're finishing that off. Make sure your notes are fully up to speed, and when you're ready, unpause the screen, please. Okay, so I've gone back to this slide just so that was in a class situation we could summarise the information. But I want to finish just by showing you or giving you this link to a YouTube video. Now, this YouTube video is quite a good little link to information about migration, which is affecting the UK. So it's worth a watch. So have a little click on it, look at it. If it's not saved onto the Job Vlogs folder of 365, it's worth typing that in just to seeing if that link still works, because it is a good video just to help cement and consolidate your knowledge. Okay, and once you've watched that, you really have covered this second UK challenge. So well done for getting through it. I'll see you next time for the third of 4 challenges. Well done for listening. Thank you very much. See you next time.